Hello everyone, greetings. I'm Dr. L. Santosh Kumar, Assistant Professor of English at Christianity College, Autonomous, Bengaluru, Karnataka, India. It gives me immense pleasure to meet you all virtually. And today I'm here to deliver a talk titled Testimonio and Islamic Feminism. And when we talk about Testimonio and Islamic feminism, we have got multiple resources, and most importantly, it makes each and every individual to unlearn and to revisit their own tradition and cultural patterns. And I'm here to give a lecture on this particular topic called testimonial and Islamic feminism, which is the need of the hour. And most importantly, these two topics, they are creating a paradigm shift, and that paradigm shift is making literature to be interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. And I would just like to begin my lecture by saying that literature in the contemporary times is being defined as culture specific production. I just repeat, literature in the contemporary times is being defined as culture specific production. And most importantly, culture studies or cultural studies is said to be a broad and a comprehensive term which includes literature, anthropology, economics, politics, social sciences, and so on. And after the advent of culture studies, the gap between the anthropologists and the humanistic scholars have been bridged. So, thus begins the interdisciplinary approach to knowledge. And most important thing, literary texts have gained the status of autotelic. The meaning of the word autotelic is autonomy. And in the good old past, people defined literature as fictionalized facts or fiction which is being provided to the readers that can be 100% fiction or that can be 50% facts and 50% fiction. Whereas now in the contemporary times, literature has become an entity which cannot be erased or which cannot be forgotten. Same time, literature cannot be avoided or neglected. Literature in the contemporary times, through testimonial and Islamic feminism, it makes the individuals to reread the text or to remember, to represent, or to revisit the societal structures and which is the need of the hour. And if you look at this particular slide, it talks about the importance of history and historiography. In the contemporary literary discourses, we cannot deny the fact by saying that it is only history that is determining the literariness of a text. Of course, it is a well known fact that history books and historians and historiographies, they play a crucial role, or they play a pivotal role, or they play a predominant role in determining the literariness of a text. In the good old past, people, they made it very sure that literature and history cannot be combined. Literature and history were said to be irreconcilable binaries. Whereas in the contemporary times, after the advent of cultural studies, people started to reread history from literary perspective, and history from people started to reread history from literary perspective and literature from historical perspective. Historicity of a text and textuality of a history play a vital role in determining one's own veracity of original truths. And here you could see the difference between history and historiography. And when we talk about history pertaining to testimonial and Islamic feminism, we are supposed to identify, or we are supposed to be aware of the fact that history, right, from the good old past pertaining to the books which were present to the individuals, present to all of us. They have spoken only about the importance of an individual, whereas the collective plight or the plight of an individual had never been portrayed in the history books. And another most important thing, historians, travelogues, and travel writing, these three factors play a vital role in making the unknown facts as known. And the most important thing here, which we as the readers or we as a literary learners, what we are supposed to identify here is that history, to a greater extent, is being falsified. And also at the same time, it is not the fault with the history alone. The people who indulge in the art of historiography, they are supposed to be blamed for it. And it is a well-known fact that we are living in a world or we're living in a society where falsified truths are being glorified and original truths are being nullified. And the supreme irony is that the falsified truths gain momentum unconsciously and unknowingly, and this is the success of the political monopolization which operates at different levels. And next most important thing here is that when we talk about historiography, the most important thing here is that historiography, it not only deals with the study of history, but also at the same time it deals with the process or the creation of a history. And it's a well-known fact that the historians are said to be the cultural torchbearers. And also at the same time, it is only these historians, they make each and every individual or they make each and every layman of the society to understand how the truths and how the facts were being brought to the world and how they were being misrepresented or how they were misguided. And the supreme irony is that one when after reading testimonial historiography, they come to a consensus that in the process of historiography itself, the falsification or the fabrication of thoughts occurs. And so it is my bound duty to make each and every individual to understand the fact that literature and history are intertwined, and also at the same time, historicity of a text, textuality of a history, they play a predominant role. And an individual, it can be a scholar of any domain, whether he can be from a domain or he can be a science domain. It is the bound duty of the scholars in the present scenario to read history and historiography together. The moment when history is being separated from historiography, it will be very difficult for an individual to identify the difference between falsified truths and original truths. And the impact of falsified truths and original truths can be found in the literary text which deals with the element of testimonio and Islamic feminism. And next, if you look at the next slide, now it is my bound duty to give a brief introduction about this particular theory called testimonio. And when we talk about testimonio, we are supposed to revisit or relocate our memory to the Latin American discourses. And now we are calling it as a testimonio. And testimonio is derived its name from the testimonial literature. So people, they define as testimonial literature is derived from the word testimonio, which means witness narrative. The women in the Latin America, they protested against the patriarchal norms of the government. And the supreme irony is that the women at that time, they thought that it is high time for the king who was ruling Latin America at that time. it is high time for him rethink, to rethink his political ambiguity or to rethink his political structure. And the supreme irony is that the voices of the Latin American women were not being recorded properly. And the writers who sprung from Latin America, or the writers or the testimonialistas, the writers of Testimonio, they are called as testimonialistas. And these people, they recorded the facts. And supreme irony is that almost all their facts were not published in a form of a book, and their facts were being recorded as a scripture. And even that all those scriptures, or even all the paints were being portrayed in the paintings, yet then almost all the things were made unknown by the power structures. So, to make it very clear, testimonio means witness narrative, and most importantly, uh, according to George Kugelberger, one of the hardcore critic of testimonio, he defines that testimonialista can explain his or her own personal testimony directly by addressing a specific interlocutor. And next, another most important thing here is that testimonio to a to a greater extent, act as an interface between politics, history, culture, and ideology. And one more thing, academicians, they often have a misconception that testimonio and school of feminism, they go hand in hand. And it is completely a contradictory statement. Feminism as a movement or as a school of thought is of different genre or is of different specters. Whereas testimonio, initially, it started as a women's movement, but later it became a tool for voice for the voiceless, or it became a tool for the people where their agonies or their plights, when their plights or when their agonies are not being heard, they considered testimonial to be a powerful tool. And in the contemporary times, testimonials are said to be the socio-political tool. And another most important thing here is that a famous critic called John Beverley, he defines that the best way to learn subaltern literature is through testimonials. The best way to learn subaltern literature is through testimonials. And the greatest thing is that almost all the critics of testimonials or the writers of testimonial were called as testimonialistas, they emphasize the fact that testimonials are said to be the eye openers. And most importantly, testimonial puts an end to the falsified truths, which in turn puts an end to counter histories. And anecdote. The term anecdote is playing a vital role in the contemporary times. Anecdote, it has got nothing to do with the literary text, but it is involved in the production of the literary text. And another most important thing here is that we are living in a society where people often ask us how authentic is authenticity. When I talk about a particular social cause, it is a well-known thing, a very common question in the contemporary times. Am I being a victim of it? If I'm not a victim, how can my voices or how can my truths can be made known to the people? And what do they think is that a person who is being victimized, it should be directly from the horse's mouth. When the person, it might be he or she, when they undergo the emancipation or when they undergo a traumatic phase, when they started to call out their emotions, only at that time the plight of falsified voices and falsified truths will be made known to the world. And all those things are possible only through Testimonio, and academia in the contemporary times considers Testimonio to be the biggest asset, and most importantly, it is only Testimonio which elevates literature to different domains and which in turn made literature to be interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. And next, if you look at this particular slide, it deals with the element of women and history. And we have got so many women writers, we have got so many women political leaders, we have got so many women who are known for their charismatic attitudes and for their charismatic thoughts. But yet, then, the problem with women pertaining to history is that their voices or their representations were not being recorded properly. And here I would like to quote the famous line of Malala: one book and one pen can change the entire world. And history or history, which is being presented to us through women, it is being represented to us, and it is a welcome augury. And why do we talk about women with history is that the voices of the women are supposed to be recorded in the books. And it is a well known fact that when a famous literary writer, Virginia Woolf, where she was not allowed to enter into the library, and at that time she made a bold statement. She made a wonderful statement by saying that it is an universal call for the entire for the entire women folk to revolt against the patriarchy. And it started from there. And till now, we could see so many representations and so many truths are coming out from women's side. And most important thing here is that books are said to be the repository of cultures which will keep the wounds alive. And when all those books, when they portray or when they foreground the voices of the women, there lies the success of original history and the authentic evidences or the authentic facts. See, look at the choice of my diction: authentic evidences or authentic facts. It might sound an oxymoron to everyone who are listening here, but yet then we are living in a society where oxymorons and fragmentation are being celebrated to a greater extent, and it is a painful act. And another most important thing here is that whether it might be a testimonial or Islamic feminism, almost all these discourses, they emphasize on the fact that the voices of the women are being foregrounded and literature has become the backdrop. It is only these voices of the women they gain momentum, and it's only through their representations, or it's only through their ideologies the world comes to know about the unknown facts and the unknown truths, and which paved way for multiple multiple interpretations. So this is the beauty of history pertaining to women. And almost all the women writers, almost all the women voices were not being brought to the limelight. Yet then these voices they gain momentum to a greater extent, which in turn acts as a threat to political monopolization. And if you look at the next slide here, this particular slide, it talks about the importance, or in other words, the meaning of Islamic feminism. And when we look at this particular word, Islamic feminism, 20 years back, people considered this to be an oxymoron. And most importantly, they thought that it doesn't make any sort of sense. And whereas in the contemporary times, the term Islamic feminism is gaining momentum like anything else. And the term Islamic feminism clearly indicates that rereading Holy Quran from women perspective, and most importantly, the Islamic women who claim for their rights, and when their rights are not being accepted by their society, these women folks, they started to raise their voices, and their mode of protest is said to be a social rebel. And all these social rebels, they confront to a fact by saying that under the name of a particular ideology, women's voices should not be shaken, or women's voice should not be manipulated, or women's voice should not be muted. Yet then, the term Islamic feminism, it gives a very different perspective, or it gives a new variation or a new variant to the people who think, okay, who think that feminism highly supports women empowerment, whereas Islamic feminism, it encourages or it requests people to understand understand their religion from their perspective, so that the people in the contemporary times will have a worldly knowledge, so that through their knowledge, world literature or literatures in general can elevate to a greater extent. And next, if you look at the next particular slide here, misrepresentation of women's voices. And if you look at Testimonio or Islamic feminism, almost almost all these writers or the writings, they emphasize on the fact that uh, falsification of truths or manipulation of truths were huge. And after the advent of these theoretical discourses, the writers, they made people to relearn, revisit, and reread. But yet then, the misrepresented voices of women were not being culled out to a greater extent. And another most important thing here is that it might be testimonialistas or the Islamic feminists. They claim the fact by saying that um, histories and oral traditions, they are said to be the pioneer for each and every civilization. And we are living in a society where we all of us run behind documentation, but yet then it is our bound duty to analyze how people in the good old past, before the advancements of technologies, how they glorified the impact or the importance of oral traditions. And through oral traditions, we could able to know how women were being treated in a positive sense, and most importantly, how the voices of the women in the good old past gain momentum, whether it might be an oppressive or it might be a repressive, or even it can be a rebellious. But yet then the voices of the women right from the good old past till now are being heard. But the problem is that the power structures, the society, which is completely patriarchy, they are not in a position to give a concrete solution. And testimonials and Islamic feminism, they are at a point of view by making people to have a contrapuntal reading. The moment when they indulge in contrapuntal reading, what happens is that people will have a divergent thinking, and most importantly, they try to understand each and everyone's ideology from their perspective, which leads to unique sensibilities. And on the whole, I would like to conclude my presentation by saying that gender sensitization is the need of the hour, and also at the same time, it is high time for each and every individual to accept, glorify histories so that the upcoming generations will never undergo any sort of cultural assimilations or they will never make any individual to become prey for cultural and political monopolization. Thank you.